This video presentation has been classified by the ABC as M. It contains material that is not recommended for persons under 15 years.
I didn't hear him walk in. Next thing, me head's been banged against the desk, bashed and then sodomised by one while I was made to give the other bloke head job. When he left, that's when I just lost it. It's something you hear of before you go to jail, but you always think it won't happen to you. And unlucky enough, it happened to me.
How common is rape in Australian jails? Prison authorities believe it's rare, but judging by the testimony we've received from current and former inmates, the story of rape in prison is one of power, silence and underreporting.
I just killed me down on me bed and they raped me and put things where they're not supposed to.
This ex-prisoner was born with cerebral palsy, sentenced in 2006 to 3 months for driving without a licence. He was raped on his first day in prison.
I just felt like taking my own life. That's how down I was.
There are 93 adult prisons in Australia, housing around 30,000 prisoners. We'd like to tell you how many of those have been sexually assaulted, but we can't. Why? Because believe it or not, nationally, no one's bothered to find out. Prisons are run at state level, and 6 of the 8 states and territories have never tried to add up the numbers. Studies in Queensland and New South Wales, the only states that have tallied the figures, suggest the rates are low.
The prevalence of sexual assault, I believe, has been overstated, and it's only been in the last couple of years that we've been able to complete very robust research that's given us some real insight into the prevalence of sexual assault in our prisons.
In Queensland and New South Wales, a market research company was hired to conduct 30-minute phone interviews in 2007 with 2,000 inmates. The subsequent reports, co-authored by the New South Wales Department of Corrective Services, found less than 3% of male prisoners reported being sexually assaulted. On the surface, that might look like a good news story, but some believe the methodology of the studies led to significant underreporting.
So we can't expect somebody to just write on a piece of paper, yes, I was raped. For most of the men, it was the most traumatic experience they'd ever experienced.
In 2010, Murdoch University criminologist and former inmate Dr. Brian Steels set out to research some figures of his own. Originally allowed into Western Australia's jails to conduct face-to-face interviews, his access was revoked when his criminal record came to light. He ended up basing his research on interviews with 150 ex-prisoners and estimates the sexual assault rate to be 14%.
This trauma was buried very, very deep. It's during the second interview that they started to disclose that, look, it's a bit embarrassing for me, but, I witnessed this happening. But on more than one occasion, we went from that into, look, this happened to me as well.
What also makes it hard for researchers is that any figure will inevitably underestimate the scale of the problem, simply because prison culture guarantees sexual assault is rarely reported.
There's silence at the source. Victims are too scared to identify that they're victims.
Dr. Wendell Roseveare has worked with victims and perpetrators of rape in Queensland prisons for 30 years.
I've seen some guys and I said, I can arrange protection for you now if you want to, and they said no. If I do that, I'll be labelled as weak or a dog, and so I won't accept that option.
Did you dog? No. I'm gonna fuck you like I did the other day. And was told that if I'd told, I'd be knocked. No matter where I'd get moved to, I'd be gotten to.
After being raped, Ken spent the following 4 years in the same unit as the men who raped him.
You get raped and you're more or less treated as the bad guy from the guards, the system. You get out of the medical centre, you're put back in the same unit. I sat in my cell for a bit and one of the two came back and beat me and made me do it again.
They're scared and they don't have visible, easy access to report or ask for help, or they think that they're going to be re-victimised by asking for help.
While we don't know how many men are raped in prison, we do know from the available research that the kinds of prisoners most likely targeted are young, non-violent, short sentence offenders. And we know that rape victims return to our community carrying the damage.
Being raped just changed me dramatically. You feel like the lowest bit of shit on earth. It's what led me to get put into a couple of different psychiatric places because I just won't sleep.
One of my patients had been a victim. He was really, really angry about the rape that he experienced. It was really degrading rape. He was raped in the toilet, and so he became so resentful and he couldn't achieve intimacy in his marriage, and he turned to alcohol, and then he actually abused 2 of his daughters, and so he hated himself for what he'd done. It'll present as drugs, it'll present as suicide, it'll present as self-harm, it'll present as people murdering other people, it'll present as revenge, but it won't present as someone saying, I've been raped.
Let's do some maths. If the sexual assault numbers are as low as New South Wales and Queensland official figure of 2.4 to 2.9%, that means 700 to 900 of the 30,000 people currently in prison have been sexually assaulted. If they're closer to Brian Steele's estimate of 14%, the number jumps to 4,200. Hungry Beast asked every state's Corrective Services Department to tell us how many sexual assaults were reported last year. The answers? 30 in Queensland, 10 each in Western Australia and South Australia, and 1 in the Northern Territory. Victoria wouldn't release their figures, and despite repeated requests, the rest didn't get back to us. So no overall national numbers. But of those reports, only 2 sexual assault allegations have so far made it to court.
This mentality that says, if you go to jail, you deserve to be raped, and will use rape as a disincentive for crime, is really part of a revenge culture where society says, we will reject you and we will devalue you. We're actually feeding the power base that actually generates the rape.
Society gives a big shit about women that get raped. A man getting raped in jail is the same thing, but yet it gets swept under the carpet. Because you're in jail. Who gives a fuck about you? Well, you're still a human being.